Chapter 1. About 1,000 years ago in the world of Ortuna, there were the three kings, all being named Arthunus, Flammus, and Draken. The three kings had originally ruled over the overworld, over man with peace and harmony. However, it did not last long. King Flammus became jealous that he had been given a less important role compared to the other two kings, so he rebelled against the two other kings, and the kingdoms went to war. The battle was known as the Great Battle. King Arthunus and King Draken formed an alliance against King Flammus. During the battle, each human was slain, except for a little girl named Gina. She lived alone and struggled to survive. However, she managed to take care of herself. The battle raged till King Arthunus used the remainder of his power to defeat King Flammus. King Flammus kneeled to the ground in defeat and was exiled by the order of King Arthunus to the Nether. Before he was defeated and casted into the dimension, King Flammus casted a curse upon Draken after defeating him. King Draken was cursed to slowly turn into a dragon. King Draken then chose to leave the kingdom and move to the End Dimension, where he completely turned into an Ender Dragon with no prior memories of who he even was. Now King Arthunus was the only remaining king in the overworld, and he decided to further protect his capital city of his kingdom, called Ortuna, by having a huge glass cover the city by submerging it hidden underwater. That way the city would be protected and hidden from the sight of any enemy to come. Later on, King Arthunus begat a son and heir named Arthun. When Arthun became a teenager, he went out to the surface, and while there, he met the remaining human, a female named Gina, now all grown up and fair to look upon. The prince fell in love with her and took her as his wife, and she later conceived and bore the prince a son and a daughter. The son was named Copernicus, and the daughter was named Darla. Then came the time when King Arthunus had died, that his son had heard of the news, and went and claimed the throne, and he became king. Then his seed multiplied on the land as the newly repopulated human race. Chapter 2. Prince Copernicus then took his sister Darla to wife, and she bore him sons and daughters. Among their sons was a man named Achim. Achim and his siblings were forced to stay upon the overworld by the decree of the king of Ortuna. They then resided together on the land of Zeha, and multiplied there. Then Achim took a sister of his to wife, and begat sons and daughters. He even begat Ubal. Then Ubal took a cousin to wife and begat Sheth. In Sheth's days, the human population began to grow, and they split up upon the land. They were forced to split up due to a failed coup that never took place. Sheth was a man of great stature. He was ruddy and blond, and a mighty man who hunted the evil beasts of the field, fending off those who attacked Zeha. He gained favor in the sight of men, and this got to his head. He saw himself as greater than the rest of men, and he appointed himself as leader of the human race. Sheth stood on a hill looking over at mankind and said to them, "Hearken to my voice. I have fought Tannins and the beasts of the field. I even drew my bow and shot the fowls of the air and fended off our precious land of Zeha. Now I call arms to fend off from a greater evil than the beasts of the land. Make me thine leader, and we shall conquer the threat of the kingdom of Ortuna, for they desire our extinction." However, Sheth had lied to them, and they gave in to the lie. They appointed Sheth as the leader over them, and they constructed the first ship since the extinction, and they sailed to the sea, and the king of Ortuna said to his juggernaut, "Go to and send out a great fog." And a fog was set over the entire sea, and man could not locate the sunken city. Days passed over the sea, and each man began to complain and lost faith in their leader, and each man sought to appoint themselves as the new leader, and spoke of slaying Sheth for the role. This is the moment when man was on the brink of dividing. They returned to land and rebelled against their leader Sheth, and they each took their families and divided, leaving the land of Zeha to establish the land of Hud, Dur, Azza, Ara, Zetu, and other unidentified tribes, and multiplied across the overworld. This was also the time when ethnicities came into existence based on the tribes and people that were divided. Sheth was brought low and was ashamed at his failure. Afterward he continued to rule the land of Zeha with an iron fist, and took a wife called Micaiah and begat sons and daughters, one of which was a man named Messiah, of whom Sheth despised. Messiah was a shepherd upon the land of Zeha, and fended off the land of Zeha similar to his father prior to him. Then Messiah begat a son named Segub. It is in the days of Segub that the earlier kingdoms since the extinction began to form. Sheth was slain, and his rival from the people of Dur set themselves a king over Zeha named Conan. Conan was a mighty man who ruled over the giants of the people of Dur in his reign, for the people of Dur were giants in his days. He was the son of Arad, the son of Amaz, the son of Tuk, the son of Akim, who in turn was the son of Prince Copernicus of the kingdom of Ortuna. He took the sister of Segub named Zada to wife, and he had hybrid giants. It is in these days when giants first went to war with man and had prevailed for a time, and ate of their flesh, till Segub led a rebellion against the giant king Conan, and chased them back into Dur. Since those days Segub ruled over the land in Conan's stead. Then his son Brul after him did likewise, till he was chased off of the throne and replaced by his brother Joaz. Brul then went on to have a son named Yeldon. Yeldon then begat Joz. Joz begat Phokan. Phokan begat two sons named Isham and Enom. Isham was a man of renown and a criminal in the land of Zeha, and he and his sons formed the land of Isham. Then Enom, Isham's brother, went on and begat Arid. Arid begat Jamin. Jamin begat Natan. Natan begat Caleb. Caleb begat Sequoia. Sequoia begat Abel. And Abel took a Zealite woman named Gisleah as his wife, and had a son named Enom. Chapter 3. This account was written by Zini the scribe of Zeha Enom. Enom was born in Zeha to a man named Abel and his wife Keziah, of whom Abel took among the fair daughters of Zeha, for she is a descendant of Joaz, the late long-time king of Zeha, for it is said, the daughters of Joaz are the fairest among the daughters of Zeha. They lived in Zeha to raise their son Enom in peace, till the day came when a known tyrant of their day named Akash took the land, and ruled as king there, and demanded for certain of the people to be slain for sport for his own pleasure. Enom's parents were one of Akash's targets, and they knew this, and they went and hid their son Enom, and he watched as his parents were cut down before his eyes while in his hiding spot. Enom that day sought vengeance. He escaped without being detected and fled to the land of Hud, and he grew there, and performed tasks for the people of Hud. Enom became an assassin for the ruler of Hud, and carried out his deeds and wishes, and became well trained in those tasks, and he earned coins by performing these tasks. Then Enom retired himself from being an assassin, and he turned and used the shekels to hire trained men from among the people of Hud, and hired them to be Enom's men in an attempt to retake Zeha against Akash, the tyrant, for revenge from the very act of the slaughter of Enom's parents. Enom waged battle against Akash and his men, and slew many of them with the edge of the sword, for they expected not this battle so suddenly. Enom himself slew Akash with the edge of the sword, and chased away the rest of Akash's men. The people of Zeha rejoiced and gladly made Enom their leader for a time, and they uncovered an ancient palace from the early days of the kingdoms, and Enom dwelt there. However, it wasn't to last long, for he turned and ruled the land with an iron fist and robbed the people of their coins to make himself rich. A month into his reign, a rebellion broke out, and they chased away Enom and his men hired from the people of Hud. Enom then went north and plundered any village he saw as a result, and he came to locally be known as a famous robber. Enom robbed in the wilderness with his trained men, and even took a village to the coastal north, and named the land after himself, Enom. Enom and his men did anything they pleased to the inhabitants of that village, and would continually sin there. Enom was a cold-core robber, ruling over Enom with an iron fist, way worse than how he ruled in Zeha, for he slew no residents there under his rule. The people of Zeha then saw they had no king, and they appointed themselves a new king, a man named Koa. Koa vowed to protect the land of Zeha from Enom and his men, and chose from the sons of Isham a man named Phelan to lead his men in battle against Enom. They waged war till Zeha itself was under threat of another king from a far-off kingdom, for it was Ish, the king of the slimes, who went up and attacked Zeha. Due to this, King Koa pulled his attack on Enom back, and turned his attention to fend off the slime kingdom's attack on Zeha. Then Ish slew Koa with the edge of the sword, and all of his fighting men of valor, and put their bodies on display for all of the children of Zeha to see. Thus Zeha was under control of Ish's hand, and all of the children of Zeha feared Ish, and they hid themselves from him within their homes. Then one escaped from the children of Zeha, ran and told Enom of what had happened to Zeha, and Enom made haste with the children of Hud, and laid a surprise attack upon the slimes at Zeha, and Enom himself went alone to meet Ish face to face. Enom spotted Ish, the king of the slimes, upon the roof of a home awaiting for Enom's arrival, and Enom shouted to the slime king, I suppose this is you, Ish, the king of the slimes. You look less threatening than I thought you would. Yes, it is I. Now perish, Ish responded to the bandit leader of Enom. The king leapt off and charged at him with an iron sword, while Enom fought with a stone axe and a shield. Each swing that Enom would land on the king, he would not die, for he was a slime. Eventually, Enom prevailed in the battle, for he swung down his axe upon the crown of the Slime King, and his crown broke into two, and he collapsed into a pile of slime likened unto a pile of dung, and his men did likewise, and he was dead by the hand of Enom. When Enom and the children of Hud saw that Ish and his slimes were dead, they rejoiced with a loud shout. Then Enom turned to the children of Hud, and said unto them, We may have won this battle, but surely the Zahalites will pursue us, and put us to death. Peradventure they would spare us. Therefore we must retreat back to Enom. Then just as they had quickly arrived, they likewise quickly departed back to Enom's domain. Once the inhabitants of Zahah emerged from their homes, they saw that Ish and his men were dead upon the field of the land, and they rejoiced, but knew not who their defender was. Then a witness came up and said to them, It was Enom the robber, the son of Abel of Zehah, who hath slain Ish. We hath judged him wrongly, for he surely must have not known how to rule over us. Therefore we must go to, and ask him to be king over us under the condition of having advisers by his side. This suggestion by the witness pleased the children of Zehah, and they repented of their decision of casting Enom, their brother, from among the land of their ancestors, and sent out men to recover him. However, Enom knew not of this decision made by his brethren. The event of defending his land made an impact on his heart and changed his mindset, and he repented of his wicked deeds upon both Zehah and his domain of Enom, and he abused and slew the inhabitants of Enom no more. Chapter 4. Then a messenger arrived at the land of Enom, wearing never-before-seen armor with bright color, without having a single scratch upon it. Every man that looked upon the man's armor was left in wonder. Then Enom saw the man in his armor, and became fearful of the man. The man in the armor approached before Enom, and personally passed him a letter, and Enom read it before the people around him. Message from the king of Ortuna. Enom, you have been chosen to take part of the king's court in Ortuna. However, you have to change your ways and amend your mistakes in the land of Zehah. After Enom had read the message, he asked the man in the fancy armor, I thought the sunken city kingdom of Ortuna was merely a myth of old. Nay, Enom, but he is real as you and I are. After hearing those words, Enom's heart sank as he speedily stood up from his judging seat and became fearful of what the king of Ortuna could do to him. The messenger then said to Enom, You must make amends with this people and those of your birth, the land of Zehah. Then shall we come and take thee to Ortuna before my king. We shall give thee 2 days. Then the messenger departed, and Enom snapped his axe into two and wept sorely. Not long after, a man from Zehah came to recover Enom, and he said to him, Come and be our king again, for we hath no king, and thank thee with all of our hearts for fending our land from Ish the king of the slimes. Enom kneeled down and wept at the feet of the man, and said to him, Forgive me, for I have sinned against our people. The man was shocked and asked, Is this how a king should act? Get thee up and come with me. Then Enom and the children of Hud came with the man to Zehah. When the children of Zehah saw Enom in a company of people coming to the capital in the plain, the people saw Enom and said, Let us go down and meet our king. Then the children of Zehah rushed down to meet their king, and they rejoiced and embraced him. Enom said to them, Shall I be thine king again? What about the wickedness I hath brought upon thee? The children of Zehah replied to Enom, Be our king again, as we see your heart is still in our people, and in this land our brother. Then Enom wept out loud before them, and said to them, Forgive me, for I shall surely die for my evil upon thee. The children of Zehah then responded to him, We forgive thee. Come and be our king again, and let there be advisers by thine side. So Enom arose, and they once again crowned him king over Zehah, and they sat him upon the throne of the palace once more, and the land of Enom became a vassal to Zehah. The inhabitants of the land of Enom were not pleased, for they said in their heart, How could such a tyrant who had slain our parents be forgiven, and become king of the very land he was banished from? Chapter 5. This account was written by King Enom of Zehah Enom. 2 days into my reign, after becoming king over Zeha for the second time, the same messenger from Ortuna returned, and I left with the messenger to the shoreline of Zeha. We waited, and I in confusion asked, "Why are we standing idly by?" Then, as I had said this thing, a huge sea scorpion-like arthropod structure surfaced from the water. It was scaled to be larger than any Navy ship that I have ever seen in my entire life up to this point. He led me inside, and by causing a huge water bubble to continually spin around us, and it lifted us up onto the structure. I was left in awe over the whole situation. The structure, in the form of a sea scorpion, then submerged underwater to the depths. Watching us travel downward scares me. My mind was filled with what could lie underwater and slay us. Eventually we went deep enough and went through an even deeper cavern, large enough for us to go through. It appeared as if it were a giant eye of a skull. We went even further down till we reached the end of the cavern, where what appeared to be a bubble as a gate, and on the other side I saw some lush grassland. However, I could not see much from where we were. We slowly went through it, and before I knew it, we were flying above the ground. The experience amazed me. I had a better view of the world beneath us. Behold, I saw that the land was very lush and huge. The trees in appearance seemed to be like no other tree that I have ever seen with my own eyes. I even saw tannins roam the land and eat from the tall trees, and even soar high up to our level, and above the land high up was a large rock wall ceiling, and I wondered where the source of light was coming from, if there is no sun here. I even saw great and mighty structures across the land, and man had tamed the tannins and rode upon them. The land appeared to be a paradise with no violence in sight. We flew over till I laid eyes on a great and wonderful city, which was greater than the palace in Zeha. The city stood on the water therein, with a crescent island surrounding a smaller island with a palace in its center. We flew closer, and I saw the people living in harmony with the streets therein packed, living amongst tannins, as we do not live with tannin in Zeha, for they are too dangerous for us to tame. The messenger then came up to me with his left hand, reaching out to the city, and said unto me, "Behold, the kingdom of Ortuna." The man said that with some light of joy from his lips. Then I turned my eyes unto the city again, admiring its beauty. Then the messenger said unto me, "Come, I will take you to my king." Then he took us by the bubble again, as we levitated downward onto the dock of the center island with the palace. We landed on the dock, and the people and the tannin surrounding us all had their eyes upon us. I would imagine they were looking at me, since I wore dirty garments, as they were wearing white and colorful clean garments, each looking adorned as if they were at a wedding feast. The messenger gestured for me to go upward to the palace. I went upward slowly and looked at my surroundings with amazement. I finally arrived at the palace. It was the most adorned palace that I had ever laid my eyes upon, up till this point in my life. The throne room was scaled to be larger than my own palace in Zeha. The roof of the room was being held up by pillars as tall as palm trees. And behold, there at the far back was a throne. The throne was supported by a tall structure, and there upon it a king sat upon the throne up top. I had barely got a good glance at him before I immediately fell to the floor and bowed myself. Then the king stood up from his throne, and he came down to me by the long steps leading up to his throne. He came to stand a few cubits before me, but I kept myself down to the floor. Then the king said to me, "Enom, I have heard a lot about you and your decision to save Zeha from Ish, but I don't understand why. Why did you choose to help them instead of dispute your past with them?" I heard his words come to my ears, so I responded while keeping myself down with my face still toward the floor, still not looking up at him, fearing that he might slay me for a poor choice of words. "Zeha is my birthland. It is in my heart. It shall remain my true land of origin." The king responded, "I applaud you for it. Therefore I am trusting you to keep the kingdom of Ortuna. I am giving you the land that will be the first nation in a long time since the days of Isham. The kingdom shall be called Zehinam, which the capital shall be established in the land of Zeha. This land shall encompass the land of Zeha, the ocean where Ortuna is located, and the land of Enom." Then I finally lifted my head up to him, still surprised by what he said boldly and with confidence. "Why me, O king of Ortuna? For lo, I am not worthy. I hath been a wicked ruler in the land." "Who am I to keep the kingdom of Ortuna?" I responded. Then he said to me in response, "You have shown me that you are able to change thyself, which is why I invited you to join my court Enom. You may have been an evil ruler, but still people are bound to change, which is Ortuna's nature. Why? Why me of every flesh of the land? I began to be doubtful. Instead, his response lowered my worry. He responded, I trust that you would be able to protect the ocean in between Enom and Zea. If you and your descendants need help, fear not to come and ask for it. Thank you for giving me this, lest it be better if I was struck down here and now. Thou art merciful. I said that with tears of joy before the king of Ortuna. Like my father before me, I am a just and merciful king. The king of Ortuna responded. Then I asked him, with me ruling over the three realms being Enom, Zea, and the Ortunis Ocean, are there certain rules or restrictions that I need to follow? The king in response said to me, I will impose 5 laws. 1. Thou shalt not murder. 2. Thou shalt not usurp the king that I have appointed to be ruler over a certain land. 3. In every case, treason shall be handled by the king of Ortuna. 4. The king of the land shall have control over his land, with the king of Ortuna stepping into matters of importance. 5. History scrolls shall contain the history of Ortuna. After hearing these 5 laws, I stood up and said to him in response, Then so shall it be done so in Enom. Anything else you wish to add? I added. No, Enom, the rest is in your hands. Go in peace. The king gave me the leave. Thank you for having me in this paradise of a palace. Then I took my leave and was escorted back to the surface the same way I was brought in. Then I made haste and sent out letters and decrees. Thus the kingdom of Zea was reformed into the kingdom of Enom, ruling over the lands of Enom, Zea, and the ocean of Ortuna in between the 2 lands. Then I appointed Zeni, a Zealite, as my scribe, and he recorded the acts of the events during my reign. Chapter 6. This account was written by Zeni the scribe of Zea Enom. Now it was in the days of Sheth that the city was always called Zea. Therefore King Enom renamed his capital to Mount Keziah, for Enom said, My mother was of the fair daughters of Joaz, therefore let her be remembered in this way, when no man had yet named the mount, which the palace stands upon. Then Enom went up to the province of Enom, for Enom turned the land of Zea and the land of Enom as provinces, and he named the city therein, Sheleg Point, named after the snowy mountain behind the city. And he called the bay in Sheleg Point Trident Bay, for the bay was in the shape of a trident. Then Enom expanded the territory of Zea, and he took therein a small isle just to the northern coast of Zea, and he took therein an island to the northern east of Zea. King Enom named the isle Serpent Isle, and he named the island Tannin Island, when he encountered a community of Tannin still living among men there. Enom then named the bay, in between mainland Zea and Tannin Island, Lushful Bay, where many kinds of fish that live there thrive in communities. And Enom adjusted the name of Zehenom to Zehenom, and therefore that was the name from henceforth. King Enom then had a small navy built to keep guard of the Ortuna kingdom pit, wherein man can enter. King Enom spent many days repairing the damage that he had caused upon the children of Zea and the inhabitants of the land of Enom. But the inhabitants of Sheleg Point were stubborn to heed to their king. During the 8th day of his reign after the reformation of the kingdom, an advisor that he appointed named Sheila went up to him with a request. My lord, I hath but a request for thee. Say on, King Enom replied. I pray thee, let us go out and choose among the fair daughters of Joaz, and bring them hither to thee, and the one that pleaseth thee, let her be queen, so that ye may begat heirs, and surely then shall thine dynasty not die out. At the first, King Enom scoffed at the idea, saying, I hath not the time, I must make haste and make changes to the realms of my kingdom. Then he added, let it be suggested later on when the time is right. Then King Enom dismissed the meeting. He arose from his throne and he walked out of the room with everyone's eyes on him, leaving them a bit worried about their king. Chapter 7. The next day, the chief over the children of Hud came down to Mount Keziah and spoke before King Enom as he sat upon his throne. Thou art like a brother unto me, I pray thee. Take a wife from among my daughters and set her as queen beside thee. Enom, upon hearing this, was annoyed. Let it be in due time that I shall have a queen, but it shall not be now. Thou art dismissed. The chief of Hud then bowed down and took his leave. Sheila went up to Enom's other advisers, and he said unto them, Come, let us go and arrange for women to dance before the king, then surely shall he choose a queen from amongst them. The saying pleased the ears of the advisors, so they made haste and arranged for the virgins to dance before the king. They later went up to the king, each having expressions of excitement on their face, making Enom confused. Sheila whispered into his king's ear, "We hath but an early birthday surprise for you, my lord. Shall we bring it in?" Enom replied, "I shall wait till my birthday cometh." "Nay, but this thing is an arrangement, and they would have come for nothing," Sheila begged the king. "Bring them in." Enom sighed as he gave in. The guards then led in 10 beautiful young virgins, one from each different culture, and they danced before the king, but the king was not pleased. King Enom, mid-performance, had the virgins escorted out of the room, surprising his advisors. Enom, being kindled, stood up fastly from his throne and shouted at them, "Get out!" Sheila and the other advisors were stunned, as they only intended good unto their king, but their king took it unto annoyance. Chapter 8. Then the giants of Dur came up to the border of the kingdom from a mountain, shouting at the children of Zeha to mock them from across a river, saying, "Your kings are weak. The children of Conan shall rule it once more." The children of Zeha were discouraged, and they begged their king to do something about it. But he would not, for he said, "If we take action against them for this very thing, then shall they have what they want, even shall they be in the right, for we would have attacked them first. We shall wait till they attack first, so that we shall be in the right." The giants later found out the king's response to the situation, so they stopped shouting at the children of Zeha from across the border, and they schemed up a different plan. At one time, one of the giants of Dur threw a horn of a tannin across the border, and they went and reported it to the king. However, he told them to take no action. Chapter 9. Then Azar went and fought with Zeha Enom, and smote some of them. Zeha Enom retaliated back, and smote them in the wilderness of Zeha Enom. For Azar had illegally seceded from Zeha Enom, and led a rebellion from Tannin Island, and used the Tannins to pull their chariots. And the king of Azar was named Misa. The king of Azar sent a messenger with a head of a Tannin, and sat it before the throne of Zeha Enom, while Enom sat upon the throne. The messenger then said to the king, "Thus says the king of Azar, I have made a league with the children of Dur and the children of Isham. Among the children of Conan sits a giant named Ishban upon the throne of Dur, and upon the throne of Isham sits a man named Telek Conan of the Conanite dynasty. Therefore, just as this Tannin was presented before thee, so shall thy head be presented before the 3 kings' thrones. We shall smite and attack thee in thine capital within 3 days' time." Then the messenger left without the head. Everyone in the throne room was frightened, saying, "We are doomed. Yet again shall we be wiped off the map, likened unto the dynasty of Joaz." And King Enom stood from his throne, and took the head of the Tannin, and he said unto them, "Brothers and sisters, listen, ye children of Zeha. Be not discouraged, we are more than they are. Indeed, they have Tannins pulling their chariots, albeit we are more advanced than them. Come and let us build a wall around Keziah, therefore they cannot come in. It shall delay their plunder on our capital. Then shall ye gather able fighting men, and make yourselves bows and arrows, and make yourselves cauldrons, and fill them with lava from the caverns. And if it comes to pass, you shall pour them upon the heads of the Tannins, and the head upon the men of Dur, and of Isham, and of Azar. Thus says your king." They that were in the room to hear their king's speech were moved and encouraged, and they did so. They made themselves armor, weapons, bows, and arrows, and even the cauldrons, and filled them with the lava from the large caverns, and began construction of a wall around the city, and completed the work within 2 days. Then on the 3rd day the kingdoms of Azar, and of Dur, and of Isham gathered their men in chariots, and their kings were sat upon chariots likewise, with their swords drawn out to lead the plunder. The king of Isham then said, "Look, the city of Keziah hath built them a wall to keep us from plundering them. I pray thee, let us hold off the attack and come up with a plan." The king of Azar hearkened to the king of Isham's words, and they retired to Tannin Island. Chapter 10. Back at Tannin Island, King Mesa, King Ishban of Dur, and King Telek Conan of Isham all regrouped there and came up with a plan. They set up camp and made themselves thrones for each king to sit upon, for there were no buildings in Azar. The king of Azar held a feast, and slew the fattest of the calves, and some of the Tannins, and fed them to the other kings and each of their men. And he took 2 horns of one of the Tannins, and made himself a helmet containing the 2 horns. Upon seeing this, each man of Azar likewise took horns from other tannins, and they even likewise put them upon their helmets, making them fierce in appearance in their armor. Then King Mesa took some of their gold, and he made himself a golden idol of a tannin, and he worshipped it. When the kings of Dur and Isham saw this, they likewise bowed down to it. Even their men did the same, and the men of Azar followed after them, and the idol became their god, and they named the idol Ish-Tannin. They took sheep, baby tannins, and their own firstborn children, and they sacrificed unto it, causing evil across Azar. The kings of Dur and Isham loved the idol so much that they had them made in Dur and in Isham, and Ish-Tannin became their god. Chapter 11. When King Enom heard of this, he himself went down to see for himself, and he smote a scout of an Azarite in the field of Zeha-Enom while they were alone, and he took the scout's armor and helmet and put them on for a disguise. Then Enom went to Azar and saw the abominations they were committing, and it shook him to the core, seeing them like zombies, following a big golden statue and sacrificing babies to it blindly, being worse than when Enom himself was a bandit. Enom returned and confirmed their report to be true. He had Azarite armor made, and had 50 of his own men put them on, taking with them torches, with pots covering the top, being held by their other hand, and they quietly marched down to Azar at night, while their enemies partied. Once there, they surrounded some of Tannin Island, and Enom gave a shout, saying, "Burn this wicked forest down." The 50 Zeolite men then took the pots that covered the fire of their torches, and casted them to the ground where they shattered. They then took the torches and lit the outer trees on fire, slaying a lot of the Azarites, the Durites, and the Ishamites inside, and those that managed to flee the forest they slew when they came out. When the 3 kings made it out, they took them and put them in fetters of brass, taking them captive. Those that did not make it out were slain by the fire, and the forest was burnt, and the kingdom of Azar was no more. Enom from that day renamed the island to the Island of Sin. They departed back to Zeha-Enom. Chapter 12. They held the king of Azar, the king of Dur, and the king of Isham in their dungeon for a time, till they took them and went down to the sunken kingdom of Ortuna, where they were to be judged by King Arthun himself. Then King Enom of Zeha-Enom presented before the throne King Mesa of Azar, King Ishban of Dur, and King Telek-Conan of Isham before the throne of Ortuna, while King Arthun sat upon it. As the 3 wicked kings looked upon the king of Ortuna, they bowed down and wept, begging for their lives to be spared. Then said King Mesa, "Forgive us, O king of Ortuna. We merely thought you were a myth, I pray thee. Let us free, and we shall worship thee." The king of Ortuna then asked, "How do you 3 kings plead?" The king of Azar then said to the king of Ortuna, "I beseech thee, O king, Father Arthun, let our punishments be light. We rebelled against the king of Zeha-Enom, as we saw he was not fit to rule over us, for he made changes that we did not accept." After him the giant king of Dur said to the king of Ortuna, "Let your yoke be light, Father Arthun. Azar promised us to have land from the kingdom of Zeha-Enom if we put King Mesa on the throne. I only followed along as I desired the extinction of the Zahalites." After him the king of Isham said to the king of Ortuna, "Father Arthun, I have no excuse. We sacrificed our children unto our idol Ish-Tannin, for we blindly followed our new god in hopes of defeating Zeha-Enom and taking the Holy Land." Then King Mesa and King Ishban both said to King Telek-Conan, "We should have sacrificed you instead of your son, so that we would not be here." King Telek-Conan then kneeled down and wept in regret, while the other 2 kings still stood up in hopes of escaping justice. "Stop crying and get up. I am a just and merciful king, for I will strip you all for your powers and have you do community service forever." The king of Ortuna lashed out. Then King Enom asked, "How is community service punishment enough for 3 kings who slew many children?" The king of Ortuna then asked King Enom, "Then what do you suggest, Enom?" King Enom responded, "During the rule of the dynasty of Joaz over the children of Zeha, we had a law where they would be put to death before the people for crimes such as what these 3 kings have done. This was in effect up until King Akash stole the throne and slew King Durl, the final king of the house of Joaz, till I slew King Akash for slaying my parents and taking the throne from him." "So be it," the king of Ortuna replied. Enom then asked, "Where shall they die?" The king of Ortuna replied, "You choose." The king of Enom then took the 3 kings and smote their heads off before the children of Zeha in the capital city of Kazaya. Then Enom had their heads on pikes for 3 days. Afterward he had the heads of Ishban and Telek-Conan sent to the kingdoms of Dur and Isham to their newly crowned kings. King Ishban's brother Barban succeeded him as king of Dur, and King Telek-Conan's son Ishram reigned in his stead at the age of 9 years. Chapter 13. The kingdom of Dur then laid an attack on Zeha-Enom, led by King Barban and his captain Sarza, and they had 60,000 men and 30 chariots being pulled by Tannins, and smote the children of Zeha in the plain of Zeha-Enom. King Enom then took himself some armor and a sword while wearing a crown upon his head with the armor. Then he took his captain of the host, Zaradin, along with 50,000 Zeolite men, and took they 10 chariots being pulled by Tannins, for they adopted the warfare tactics of their enemies, and they went and smote the children of Dur, 5,000 men, and pushed them toward the border. There they smote 20 and 5,000 of them, while only losing 3,000 men both times. They even pushed them down into their capital, and conquered them, and destroyed their men. King Enom had King Barban brought before him, and said to him, "You shall live and rule thine kingdom, as long as thou wilt pay tribute to your conqueror, Zeha-Enom." The kingdom of Zeha-Enom won the war against Dur, and they became tributaries unto the king of Zeha-Enom. And King Enom's fame spread throughout the known world, as the giants of Dur were always the victors in almost every battle. King Enom took a rest at his palace after the battle, while Zaradin continued to fight against the Ishamites. The next day, King Enom's birthday came, and he invited the chief of Hud, some of the seed royal of Joaz, and a representative of Ortuna. King Enom held the feast in his throne room, having tables set up for the guests, and had food and wine prepared for them, and he let them eat and drink to their own desire. However, Enom avoided the wine. The guests brought gifts to the king of Zeha-Enom, including new weapons, armor, spices, things from other cultures, clothing, servants, and concubines. However, King Enom ordered for the servants and the concubines to be returned to where they were taken from. This made the guests' anger to be kindled against the king of Zeha-Enom. One of the guests went up to Enom and asked, "Why do you avoid chances to take a wife and concubines to produce heirs to the throne? Are you into men rather than women?" To this Enom replied, "I am not into men, but I am into women. In due time I shall take a wife and produce heirs, but I do not think now is the time for me to perform that task." King Enom's advisors then pressured him to keep the concubines and have harems built for him. He denied it every time, and they pressured him harder and harder, until King Enom could not take it anymore. So he gave in, and they took in the 5 concubines, 2 from Hud, 1 from Zaytu, another from Laza, and the last one being from Hara. And they sat the daughter of King Durl, born by a concubine of his, over the harem, whose name was Sira. And the concubines eyed the king while desiring to please him, making the king nervous. Chapter 14. Later at night during the feast, a man came in unannounced, and the king of Enom said to the man, "Who art thou, and hast thou come in unannounced?" The man said to the king, "Behold, king of Zeha-Enom, because you have conquered the children of Dur the giants. Your kingdom shall form into an empire. You are the greatest of all of the kings before you, for you sought your people's safety, overtaking a wife. Therefore your seed shall multiply numerous, as the stars in the heavens, and your dynasty shall rule and be favored above all other dynasties on the face of the land, because King Arthan favored you above all other of his seed." Upon hearing this, all of the guests were amazed at the man's words, causing the king to get up from his throne to look at the man in amazement. Then the king drew close to the man and looked at him eye to eye. Then the king broke down in tears and held onto the man's garment, causing the guests to be disgusted by the king's current behavior. Then the king of Zeha-Enom asked the man, "How is this so? I am a sinner and took innocent lives from Sheleg. I was a robber and a usurper in the eyes of man. If it's not far off, I pray thee, tell me your identity." The man replied to the king, "Behold, King Enom, I am Zekiah, the father of thy father Abel." King Enom stood up in surprise, then asked, "Who sent thee?" "I shall tell thee in due time, for I have been instructed to not reveal him," Zekiah replied to the king. King Enom then asked of the man, "Reveal thine genealogy." Zekiah responded, "I am Zekiah, the son of Caleb, the son of Natan, the son of Jamin, the son of Arad, the son of Enom, the son of Phokan, the son of Jaz, the son of Yeldan, the son of King Bruel, the son of King Segub, the son of Maziah, the son of King Sheth. I am of the royal seed of House Sheth. Then Zekiah furthermore said, Listen, my grandson, before your birth I was instructed to betroth my son Abel, your father, to your mother Keziah, to fulfill a prophecy of reuniting the royal branches of Bruel and Joaz to the throne of Ziha. Your mother Keziah was a hated sister of King Durl, who tried to erase her from the history scrolls. Both were the children of King John. Upon hearing this, everyone in the room was silent in surprise upon the man's word. King Enom then embraced his grandfather and made him his honored guest at his birthday feast. Chapter 15. Now this was the genealogy from King Joaz down to Enom's mother Keziah. King Joaz reigned in the stead of Bruel, his brother, on the throne of Ziha. As he reigned, Joaz begat a son, and his name was Ram. King Ram fathered King Malachi. King Malachi fathered King Ham. King Ham fathered King Vespi. King Vespi fathered King Luel. King Luel fathered King Tubal. King Tubal fathered King Mash. King Mash fathered King Joel. King Joel fathered King Jom. King Jom fathered King Durl, and his sister Keziah, and other children. Princess Keziah was casted out by her brother the king, for her brother King Durl hated her out of jealousy, for she was the eldest and heir to the throne, and he tried to erase her from history. The king of Ziha then went out and met with the young king of Isham, and they became tributaries unto the king of Ziha. Afterward Hud willingly joined under Ziha for protection as an ally. After these things, the kingdom of Ziha declared itself the kingdom empire of Ziha. Then rebel groups formed and waged war against Ziha. However, they were all crushed under the might of the empire. Then King Enom's men scouted a cave with a local Tannin who was called Terror. The scouts were eaten by Terror. However, one fled and told it to Enom. Enom said to the survivor, I shall send thee 50 men to take down the Tannin. You shall lead them to the cave you speak of. The scout did so, and again Terror ate them, and a soldier fled and told the thing to the king. King Enom said to the man, I will go up and slay the Tannin. King Enom, as he was on his way, an elderly man said to the king, Beware Terror, the fierce Tannin who dwells in a cavern. King Enom went down to the mouth of the cave, and saw the flesh and the bones of his men upon the ground, and he saw Terror walk out of the cave, and the soldier that led Enom there fled and hid behind a boulder in fear of Terror. King Enom saw this, and he said to the Tannin, Behold, Terror, I shall not fear thee, for I am on the side of the one who is mightier than thee. Terror roared at the king and charged straight at him. King Enom casted a spear at the charging Tannin, and it smote his right eye, and he fell down at the feet of Enom. Enom drew out his sword and smote the Tannin's head off. He took the head and dragged it and left with it. As the hiding soldier saw this, he ran and shouted, Who could slay such a Tannin such as Terror? He repeated this as he ran past the locals. Once they saw the king drag the head of the Tannin and his remaining soldiers shout and dance in victory behind him, they feared Enom, saying, Who could slay a Tannin such as Terror? For he towers above all other Tannins, dominating over them with his many scars and his very sharp teeth. Who among men could defeat him, lest he be the chosen one of Arthun? Then locals joined under Ziha Enom. News spread of King Enom of Ziha Enom slaying the largest man-eating Tannin in all of Ortuna. The news even spread to the ears of Enom's enemies, and they were sorely afraid of him. Chapter 16. King Enom crushed the rebels and took them captive, and the land had rest on all sides from war. Therefore he returned to Keziah. Enom sat upon his throne again and governed the empire. As King Enom governed the kingdom on his throne, the head of the harem, Sarah, the illegitimate daughter of King Durl, taught all of the concubines and prepared them if Enom ever laid with them. In the harem was Avital of Hud and her sister Shoshana of Hud, Yael of Azah, Bracha of Arah, and Zini of Zetu. The concubines there praised Sarah for her elegance and her confidence in her teaching skills to prepare them to please the king, despite half of them being afraid of the experience. When Sarah had fully prepared the concubines, King Enom avoided them and went out and trained, casting his javelin into trees. Sarah, his cousin, then requested to be summoned by the king, yet again he ignored them, showing no interest in them. This kindled Sarah, so she held a feast for her and the concubines in the palace garden. The king wondered what the noise was from his bedchamber window. He looked out therein, and he saw his concubines holding a feast in the palace garden. As he looked on, Sarah saw him and said to him in a seducing manner, "My king, won't you come hither and join us for a feast?"
Yeah.
The other concubines then looked on and begged him to join. King Enom was spooked by them seeing him, so he quickly backed away from the window, and a servant of his saw this and said to him, "You spend too much time on war matters. I pray thee, expand your variety and go to the feasts held by your cousin Sarah." King Enom left his bedchamber, not taking the advice of his servant. However, Sheila, his adviser, overheard, and he went to Enom and kneeled down before him, begging him, saying, "I beseech thee, O king, go down to the feast of the concubines. Thou shouldest not trouble thyself with no peace, but let it be as if there were peace. What would thou do in those days?" King Enom asked Sheila, his adviser, "If I go to the feast held by Sarah, the daughter of King Durl, wilt thou be silent?" Sheila said to him, "I will cease to bother thee furthermore if thou wilt go." So the king went down to the feast of the concubines held by Sarah. He sat in silence, feeling the awkward atmosphere in the air coming from the concubines as they made gestures for him to come over to them. Sarah then asked Enom, his cousin, "Art thou afraid to be conquered by women, dear cousin? You have slain many thousand men." Enom knew she was right. So he went over to the concubines, and they embraced him and held on to him as they fed him and said nice things to him in an attempt to please him. Throughout the whole situation, the king was nervous but desired them not. Sometime after, as they still tried to please him, he still felt uncomfortable, so he hastily got up, saying, "I must go and govern." Sarah then said to the king, her cousin, "Admit it. You enjoyed the whole new experience, dear cousin." King Enom paused for a moment, not looking back at them. Then he returned to walking in the palace, leaving the concubines to be disappointed at his departure. Instead, Enom went to a private bathhouse alone. He sat there and processed the whole situation. And he said to himself, "I know not how to love nor take pleasure." Chapter 17. Sheila, the advisor of the king of Zeha Enom, took Zaradin, the captain of the host of the army, and they met in private. Sheila said to Zaradin, "Let us make a league between me and thee, for I shall gain thee the throne of Zeha Enom if thou wilt follow my instruction." To this, Zaradin responded, "Why do thou think that I will betray my king? Therefore I shall turn thee in." Therefore Zaradin took Sheila and told all his words to the king. And King Enom said to Sheila, "If this be true, then thou shalt die." Out of fear, Sheila hastily took Zaradin's sword and charged Enom with it, and a guard from behind smote Sheila, causing him to die. King Enom ordered for Sheila's body to be put on display, warning those who betray the king. Zaradin's brother Manasseh became the new advisor for the king. Then the queen of the Tannins came forth, desiring the love of the king. However, he loved her not. She desired him forevermore, but he desired her not. Love can be transformed by bond, but there is none to be found. She concluded, "There is no love but power in the hands of Seha." Chapter 18. This account is written by Utarn, the scribe of Zetu, in the 2nd year of the reign of Enom, of Seha Anam, Zeha Enom. King Anam went forth and drew water from the river that borders with Dur. There he found a wither rose, so he took it and gave it to the keeper of the garden, and he planted it therein on display for the concubines each time they go back there to admire it. However, this was no ordinary wither rose. It was enchanted, with a curse put upon it by the queen of the Tannins herself for Anam not returning her love to her. In the days of the house of Joaz, the kings of Moa, Zeki, and Zalman were slain, and their kingdoms were no more. Not a seed of their royal houses roamed the face of Ortuna. These kingdoms went through similar curses of the withered roses. A king from each kingdom rejected the queen of Tannin's love. Therefore she cursed their kingdom with a rose. With the rose their loved ones turned against them, begging for the best dress, the best jewelry, and begetting of heirs, draining the lover to death. If they were not given what they desired, they would take their own lives, and no one in history has found a solution to the flower. Sarah, the daughter of King Durl, took the concubines of King Anam to the garden, where she saw the withered rose, and asked the gardener, "Where did this flower come from? I hath not seen such a flower before in my entire life." The gardener answered her, "Your cousin, King Anam, hath drawn it from the river and sat it here for all of you to look upon and admire it." To this, Sarah and the concubines took it as a sign that the king was returning his love for them, so they held feast to themselves there as they admired the flower and smelt it therein. However, the smell of the flower was not pleasant. "To this," Sarah said, "the flower is beautiful, but surely my cousin's nose must be busted from war. How could he not smell the flower's stink?" The next day, a name-day feast was held in the palace for Sarah, the head of the harem and the daughter of the late King Dural of Seha, before it was reformed into the Seha Anamite Empire. King Enom, his grandfather, Zacchaeus, Zekiah, Utarn the scribe, Saradin, Zaradin, Manasseh, Zeni the scribe, Shoshana the concubine, Avital the concubine, Yael the concubine, Bracha the concubine, Zeni the concubine, the advisors and other officials were invited to the feast. During the feast, Sarah stood up while merry with wine, and she called to her cousin the king as he sat on his throne, "Dear cousin, why hath ye not taken myself as your wife? I pray thee, marry me, or I shall die." The saying pleased not King Enom. However, the officials were pleased by this saying, as they had begged the king to have a queen. They said to the king, "We pray thee, take Sarah thy cousin as thy wife, and let her be queen, and let her bear heirs to you. If you do not perform this task, we might consider cutting off trade ties from our bays." Sarah continued saying, "It is custom for a member of the royal house to marry another member of the royal house, to keep the line pure, dear cousin." King Enom looked toward Zacchaeus. However, Zacchaeus encouraged his grandson to give in. Enom then looked toward Saradin and Manasseh. They, too, encouraged the king to take Sarah as his wife. Then the concubines jump in, begging the king, saying, "Give us jewelry, give us clothing, give us children, lest we die." Upon hearing this, everyone looked on in wonder. King Enom became too stressed over the situation, so he got up and said to the people who were at the feast, "I shall think this over. Continue with your food and wine." The king then left the room, and Zacchaeus followed after him to his bedchamber. Zacchaeus asked his grandson, "Were you under stress, my king?" Enom said to Zacchaeus, "You don't have to call me that, for thou art my grandfather. Howbeit I left the room due to the amount of stress coming left and right. If it were up to me, I would leave the throne to another. But due to me gaining favor in the sight of the king of Ortuna, it makes life harder upon me. This yoke is too heavy for me." Zacchaeus said to Enom, "Your father Abel once spoke out against me for having you mother be betrothed to him, due to him thinking that a poor man such as he should not be wedded to a woman of royalty. Howbeit I told him about her father casting her out and cutting her name from the throne, and she had nowhere to go, till I took her in, and offered her to my son to give her a home and a family to love." Enom then asked Zacchaeus, "What are you getting at, grandfather?" Zacchaeus responded to his grandson, "I tell you this to remind you that you must do your duty such as I have with your father on tasking him to marry your mother, despite his fear of doing so. Take Sarah as your wife and set her as queen. This will calm the officials on begging you to take a queen, lest they would cut trading ties with Keziah. Do what is best for your nation, our nation." King Enom gave in and said to Zacchaeus, "I will go and take Sarah as my wife, and set her up as queen." King Enom returned to the feast with Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus sat down at a table, and King Enom went and stood in front of the throne and said to everyone, "I have made my decision. I shall take Sarah, the daughter of King Dural, as my wife, and I shall set her up as queen of Seha Anam." Everyone then broke into cheering, saying, "Long live King Enom and Queen Sarah." The next day a celebration was held where Enom took Sarah to wife, and he sat her as queen to reign alongside him. The title as head of the harem then was passed to Marie, sister of Saradin and Manasseh. All three were the children of Jazer, a general of Seha Anam. However, the troubles for Enom hath not ceased. Chapter 19. This account was written by Zeni the scribe of Ziha Enom. The day after Enom's wedding to Sarah, the daughter of King Dural, he sought not to touch her, nor to lay with her. Howbeit she continually begged her husband for clothing, gold, and to lay with him to give him heirs. This terrified the king, as he knew not Sarah was capable of such behavior. Enom turned to his advisors about the situation, and Manasseh and the other advisors knew not what to do, lest it were a curse. Enom then turned to Zekiah, his grandfather, and asked him, "If this be a curse, what shall I do?" Zekiah said to the young king, "I know not, your majesty. We would have to investigate your wife and your concubine's behaviors to uncover this mystery." King Enom then said to him, "Let it be done according to thine words." Zekiah then took Zaradin with him, and they found Sarah in the king's bedchamber alone, sniffing his pillow, and they asked her, "My queen, why hath you asked to be the wife of our king, while beforehand you took no interest in the throne?" Queen Sarah answered them, "I will not lie to you. At times I switch in desire of my husband and in desire of worldly things. However, I know not why this is." Zekiah then added, "We notice the same behavior in the concubines as well, no one else." Queen Sarah then suggested, saying, "Try investigating the concubines yourselves and see what you can dig up from there." Zekiah and Zaradin both go to the harem where the concubines were, and they ask them, "The each of you and the queen are having strange behaviors. You each begged something from the king and threatened yourselves with slaying yourselves. You each were not like this before, so why now?" Avital the concubine answered, "I have not taken it to be strange till now. Each of us desire children from the king, as it is our task to do so." Zaradin then asked Avital, "We assume it's some curse. What were you doing the day before Sarah's name day?" To this, Avital answered, "We were in the garden holding a feast, where we admired the beautiful sight of the black rose that our king had gotten us. However, when we smell it, the scent is that of bitterness." Upon hearing this, Zekiah and Zaradin depart and head for the garden. Once there, they saw the mysterious dark rose and wondered at its appearance. Zaradin then leaned over to try to sniff it. Zekiah stopped him, saying, "It looks cursed. If you sniff it, then you'll end up like Queen Sarah and the king's concubines." They go up to King Enom as he sits on his throne, and they ask the king, "Where did you find this black rose?" King Enom answered, "I found it on the shore of the river that divides Ziha and Dur. I was there drawing water for my horse when I spot the rose on the shore. I went to pick it up, howbeit I smelt it not, for I assumed with it being soaked that the smell would not be the best. So when I returned to the palace, I charged the gardener plant it once it had dried up, but commanded him not to smell it, as I wanted the concubines to be the first to smell it, as I had given it to them as a gift." Zekiah then asked the king, "We did as you had commanded, and we investigated your wife's and your concubines' behaviors, and we suspect that by smelling the rose the person would be cursed, which could explain the behavior of Sarah and the concubines. Was there any sort of event in your life that took place prior to you finding the flower?" King Enom answered them, "There was a woman who came up to me claiming to be the queen of the Tannins, but I believed her not. She offered her own hand into marriage to rule alongside me and her Tannins, but I turned her down, taking her to be a joke. I could tell that she loved me, but I did not desire love. She was kindled when I rejected her. As she was leaving, she shouted, 'There is no love but power in the hands of Ziha.' I know not where this woman came from, nor her personally, but I took her to be someone for diplomacy, rather than a love-struck woman." Zekiah suggested to the king, "That woman must have cursed the flower and sent it down the river. Therefore we must follow the river to find where she might tarry at." King Enom then commanded Zaradin, saying, "Gather 10 men and go with Zekiah down the river that borders with Dur and investigate where this queen of Tannins might live at. In the meantime, I shall have the flower removed and disposed of, and shall prevent my wife and concubines doing the worse. Perhaps the woman shall have a cure to this madness." Zaradin took with him 10 men and Zekiah with him, and they followed the river south till the river ended in the land of Dur. The assumption was that the woman lived in the land of Dur. They journeyed into the land of Dur and asked the giants of Dur, of the queen of the Tannins, and the curse of the black rose. They asked around for days till one giant, an ex-soldier for Dur, before it surrendered to Zeha Enom, answered, "The same curse happened to one of our kings, an ancestor of King Barban, King Ishrava, of the house of Conan the giant of Dur, during the reign of King Tubal of Zeha. The queen of the Tannins desires of becoming queen to a king of an already existing kingdom, howbeit she was cursed with every man she asked to reject her. However, she was able to cast curses as well. She offered her own hand to King Ishrava to rule alongside him over the giants and her own Tannins to unite her non-existent Tannin kingdom far south, where no man lives. She offered her own hand, and he rejected her, for he had a queen already, and he himself did not practice polygamy. Therefore she said this, 'There is no love but power in the hands of Dur.'" Then she secretly snuck what is called a withered rose into the window of the queen's bedchamber, and she sniffed the rose of its bitter smell, and she turned against her husband, demanding for many things. For a while he gave her whatever she desired. However, he eventually stopped giving her what she wanted, and she took her own life after many threats of it happening. Then they investigated her suicide, and they figured that the rose was cursed, so they took it and investigated it, and led it back to the Queen of the Tannins and found where she lived. While there, her Tannins ate them, and they gave up efforts of capturing her for a cure. And since then, no man had been able to capture her, nor do they know the cure to her curse. Upon hearing this, Zekiah wrote down the giant's words, even asking him the location of the queen's home, and they departed back for Keziah and read it before the king. Chapter 20. Upon hearing what Zekiah read to the king, King Enom stood up and commanded for Zeredin to gather 10,000 fighting men and 30 chariots pulled by Tannins. And Enom ordered for the withered rose to be put in a container. And he took the container, and he led the 10,000 men and the 30 chariots with Zeredin and Zeredin's father Jazer. And they marched down south past Dur deep into a savanna. There they found a series of hills surrounded by Tannins. As they drew closer, the Tannins randomly attacked them, and they waged battle against the Tannins, and they prevailed with their 30 Tannins and archers and the chariots fighting together in 3 separate groups in the battlefield. Afterward, they pushed forward into the series of hills and slew even more Tannins, setting the place on fire, chasing away the remaining Tannins. The Queen of the Tannins awoke from her cave to see smoke and fire around herself, and she commanded her Tannins with wings to drop boulders upon the heads of Enom's army. As the boulders were being dropped upon themselves, Enom spotted the queen, and he took the container and charged toward her alone. He went up to her at the mouth of the cave, and confronted her. He said to her, "Give me the cure, or thou shalt die." Before the queen could answer, a Tannin tail whipped Enom into a side of the cave, and he was knocked out. He awoke to see the fire out, and his men missing with Tannins, and some of his men fallen dead in battle, watching as the queen's Tannins ate their flesh. Enom saw he could not stand up as he was tied onto a pole at the mouth of the cave, and the queen of the Tannins said to the king, "King Enom of the Zia Enomite Empire, you broke my heart when you rejected me. You were not the first to reject me. My heart has been broken many times by other kings for 200 years, so in return, I turned their loved ones against them to break their own hearts. You snuffed out the curse and tried to destroy me by coming here to my kingdom of Tannin, and to try to get a cure out of me, therefore thou shalt die." King Enom then asked the queen, "Before I die, can you tell me why you are able to curse others, and why you yourself are cursed?" The queen gave in and answered, "Long ago, during the reign of King Ham of Zehah, I was a young woman who went by the name of Aisha. I was raised in the land of Isham, with my parents in its capital, which bordered with Dur. There was a war between King Ortuna of Isham and King Jeril of Dur. It was during this time that I escaped, and my parents were slain, and I fled south to here. It was filled with lots of Tannins, such as before you attacked. I was afraid to go near the Tannin, but they were friendly toward me and spared me. I saw that they were led by a giant Durates woman wearing Tannin skin. She was called the Rod of Tannin. She took me in and raised me to be her successor to reign over the Tannins of the land. Howbeit she charged me to not leave her to return home, as I had told her that I want to go and marry a king to unite our kingdoms, to strengthen our kingdoms into an empire. She told me that if I leave to attempt this, she shall curse me when I return. I traveled west to the coast to the kingdom of Zalman. I offered my own hand to King Yoru, and he accepted as they rode Tannins into battle. I returned to Tannin to tell my mentor about the news and to invite her to the wedding. She cursed me, saying, "Because you have disobeyed my orders, I myself shall curse the kingdom of Zalman by having King Yoru take his own life, and civil war shall devour the country, until there be no inhabitant left to live there, until we take the land as our own territory for 10. Your betrothal shall break, and I shall curse you, Aisha, to curse others, by trying to marry them the same way you tried with King Yoru, and they all shall reject thee till the day you die, and you shall lay curses upon them by giving them withered roses, and every king's spouses shall smell it, and shall turn against him. Only your death shall be the cure to their nightmares." Then it came to pass that King Joru had internal warfare taking place within Zalman, so he broke off our engagement to protect me, and he died during the war, and the war consumed the whole kingdom, taking every inhabitant till no man was left alive. Then my mentor claimed it as added territory to Tannin, and her Tannins moved in. This broke my heart, so I slew her in her sleep, and since then I sought love, and did just as what I did to you, with no other purpose to life left. The queen then turned to Enom and asked, "You have any final words?" Before Enom could respond, a javelin was casted into the rib of the queen, and she looked to see that it was Zeradin who had casted the javelin into her rib. Then Jazer casted a second javelin into Enom's ropes, and he broke free and used the javelin to cut the rest of the ropes off. Then he thrusted Jazer's javelin into the queen's neck, that her head rolled off. King Enom held up her head to show, and his men cheered, and they returned home after he told them the cure. They claimed Tannin and ancient Zalman as added territory to the empire. Then they departed for Keziah. Once there, King Enom sought the welfare of his wife and his concubines, and they were broken from the curse, and they sought to only comfort him in love rather than threaten him for things and to take their own lives. Once the word spread of what took place, everyone feared Enom even more than before, with terror the Tannin. Chapter 21. These were the kingdoms who fell victim to the kingdom of Tannin's curse: the kingdom of Zalman, the kingdom of Moa, the kingdom of Zeki, the kingdom of Dur, and the kingdom of Ziha Enom. The kingdom of Zalman destroyed itself with civil war. The kingdom of Moa slid into the ocean. The kingdom of Zeki burned. The kingdom of Dur grew violent, and the kingdom of Ziha Enom prevailed over the kingdom of Tannin. Thus Tannin's curse was broken by the chosen seed of Arthun. King Enom of Ziha Enom was the most feared man in all of Ortuna. He slew Akash the usurper. He even slew Ish the king of the slimes. He slew King Meza of Azar, King Ishban of Dur, and King Telek Conan of Isham. He even took their kingdoms and put them to tribute, even the rebels. Even terror, the Tannin's head is on display, and the queen of the Tannin's head is upon a pike. Who could stop a man such as the chosen of Arthun, the father of all mankind? Zetu admires Zeha Enom. Hud loves Zeha Enom as a brother. Ara and Asa tremble before Zeha Enom. Even Dur, Isham, Tannin, and Zalman bow before the throne of Zeha Enom. However, the tribe of Ashavir up in the northern tundra heareth her not, for the tribe is isolated. Ishtanin, Auyanu, Teoki, Targu, Targian, and Torpoi even hear not of the fame of Zeha Enom. Did Akash and Koa prevail against Enom in times of trouble? Did Aisha leave Enom's lovers to strive over him? And has Enom been crushed under an iron fist? Nay, but he casted a net over them and caught them and reeled them into his boat. The strength of his hammer can crush even the strong scale of a sea serpent that spits fire out her mouth. Who could stand up to the king of Zeha Enom and Arthun's chosen? Chapter 22. Zekiah went up to King Enom, his grandson, and he presented a scroll he recorded before the king. The contents of the scroll contained the life story of Enom's parents from both perspectives. The account of the following scroll was written by Zekiah, the grandfather of King Enom of Ziha Enom. Zekiah, the son of Caleb, begat a son who he named Abel. Zekiah raised Abel in the capital during the reign of King Joel of the house of Joaz. After Joel died, his son Jom reigned in his stead. King Jom begat a son named Durl, and a daughter named Keziah, and other sons and daughters. Now Keziah was born before her brother Durl, and she was favored by her family and Zeha, except for her brother, for he was jealous over the throne. King Durl schemed and came up with a plan for the throne to fall to him instead of his sister Keziah. He planted fake blood on her bed in her bedchamber as she slept in the night. When she awoke, she screamed when she saw the blood, and her servants, her father, and her brother rushed in the room, and they saw the blood. Prince Durl accused his sister Princess Keziah, saying, "Why hath ye slept with a man as a harlot? Where did the man run off to?" With both men not understanding the body of a woman. Upon hearing this, King Jom turned on his daughter, and he scolded her, saying to her, "Why have you betrayed my trust? Therefore the throne shall be passed to your brother Durl. You shall be cut off from the line of succession, and shall be casted and stripped of your titles. Begone from my sight, and never step foot in this palace again." Keziah wept and begged her father, "O father, I pray thee, believe me. This is a plot against me, because my brother is jealous of the throne." King Jom believed her not, therefore Keziah was casted out of the palace, and her father felt betrayed, believing Durl's lie. In a vision, Zekiah was instructed to betroth his son to Princess Keziah, the daughter of King Jam, for she had been casted from her royal life, for their future child shall sit on the throne of Ziha. Zekiah got up and found Keziah being spat upon by Zihalite men and women, after they had heard a false rumor about her. So Zekiah took Keziah and offered her a home if she were to marry his son Abel. To this, Keziah was skeptical, but Zekiah convinced her otherwise. Once Zekiah told his son Abel of his betrothal, he was kindled at his father for not letting him choose his own wife. Zekiah calmed him down and introduced Keziah to him, and he was smitten in love. He happily wedded her in secret so that the royal family would not learn of their marriage. After this, King Jam died, and his son Durrell reigned in his stead. King Durrell only begat one daughter by a concubine, and he named his daughter Sarah. Then Akash waged war against Zeha with the intent of taking the throne and to oppress the children of Zeha. It was during this time when Keziah bore Abel a son who they named Enom. Throughout the time of 10 years, Zeha was under constant attack by Akash, and he prevailed and smote King Durrell and stole his throne and reigned in his stead. And King Durrell's daughter Sarah fled and hid in the wilderness till Akash was dead. King Akash went and slew the Zehalites for sport, even slaying Abel and Keziah as they were his targets. However, he found not Enom, for they hid him. 10 years later, Enom, the son of Abel and Keziah, went and slew Akash and reigned in his stead over Zeha. After Enom had read the scroll, he teared up and ordered it to be copied and published as a historical scroll. Chapter 23. Enom went and smote the slimes of the Slime Kingdom Island, and they fell to Zeha Enom. Afterward he made friends with Ishram, the king of Isham, and invited him to feasts and events in the palace at Keziah. The 10-year-old king of Isham was showered in gifts and favored by Enom, and treated him as if he were a younger brother. However, Enom's advisors did not like Ishram. A man of Serpent Isle went before the king of Zeha Enom and said to the king, "O king of Zeha Enom, Serpent Isle has been under constant attacks by Kukite pirates. I beseech thee, deal with these wicked people." Enom said to the man, "I shall deal with these Kukites, for we have dominion over the sea." So King Enom sent out 20 ships to battle the Kukite ships. However, 13 out of 20 of the ships sunk, while only sinking 2 of the Kukite ships. To this, Enom wept at the loss, and repented privately in his bedchamber. Then he sent out another 20 ships, and like before, 8 of the 20 ships sunk. The Kukites took and occupied Serpent Isle, and 2 islands in the Ortunian Ocean, near where the entrance to Ortuna is. However, Zeha Enom was easily able to recapture the 2 islands, but they could not get the Kukites to leave Serpent Isle. Afterward, they also took Zalman and occupied the island strip. Their captain was a dangerous warrior named Tuolak, and he crowned himself as king over Zalman and Serpent Isle and renamed them to Kuk. It was an illegal occupation in the eyes of the world and waged war against the Kukites. Thus the children of Zeha were at war with the children of Kuk. Chapter 24. A man named Zam and his wife Azalea went forth and met with a merchant named Matthias. He worked secretly under a Kukite pirate named Koam, the younger brother of King Tuolak. Zam hired Matthias to drive out the pirates from Serpent Isle, and he did so by luring a sea serpent to the island to feast on them, and they abandoned the island, now only occupying Zalman, which they called Kuk. This was told to Enom, and he summoned Zam, Azalea, and Matthias, and he rewarded them each. Then Umma, the queen of Kuk, told the news to her husband, King Tuolak, and he was kindled against his wife over the news, that he beat her. And he and his men went out to plunder Keziah, but they could not siege the wall, so they fled back to Zalman. Then Enon, the chief of Hud, and the father of 2 of King Enom's concubines, Avital and Shoshana, was crowned king of Hud as a state, and made his son, Ram, the brother of Avital and Shoshana, his heir to the throne. King Enan and his son one day rode to Keziah and met with Enom. There the king of Hud said to the king of Zeha Enom, "O rightful king of the children of Zeha, I pray thee, let my daughters no longer be concubines, but as your wives. Sarah shall still remain your queen, but take my daughters as wives, and let them beget heirs alongside the queen." King Enom responded to Enan, saying, "Thou brought me in for safety from Akash in times of trouble. Therefore I shall return the favor and shall change your daughters' titles from concubines to wives when I take them both in marriage." The next day, King Enom wedded Avital and Shoshana, the daughters of the first king of Hud. Later on, Prince Ram was provided with a wife by his father to a woman of Era named Chua, and he loved the woman. However, the woman was in a secret affair with King Tuolak of Kuk, and his wife Queen Uma knew this, and used this as a leverage over her husband for him to do her bidding despite him being a feared man. As to her, he seemed like a puppet. Somehow this was found out, and King Enon ended his son's marriage with her, and he had her executed in Hud. Then Hud went to war with Kuk while allied with Era, for they felt betrayed by Chua and Zeha-Enom. Chapter 25. King Enom of Zeha-Enom, King Ishram of Isham, King Barban of Dur, King Enon of Hud, and Chief Goku of Era all gathered to fight against Kuk, encamped at Tanin, and they are there. While feasting, Enon said to Enom, "Behold, you started out to work under me while my 2 daughters loved you, and look at you now, a mighty king and my daughters are by your side. Tell me, when will you begat heirs to Zeha-Enom? Isn't it time to begat heirs once you return to Keziah?" Enom said to Enon, "In due time I shall have heirs when we are ready, for now we must focus on the battle." Zeha-Enom, Hud, Ara, Isham, and Dur all went and smote the children of Kuk at the river border of Zalmon, and they fled back, and they took the northern half. Then they fought downward and spoiled the country, taking Tuolak and Uma captive, along with other Kukites captive into Zeha-Enom. Thus Enom had put even more fear to the enemies of Zeha-Enom, and they said to themselves, "What man is he that cannot be put to the worst?" Chief Dan-Ra of Zatu, the father of King Enom's concubine Zini, went before the king and asked him, "If it pleaseth the king, let my daughter be thy wife." Then Enom hearkened and made Zini of Zatu his wife. A farmer named Imri, the son of Zebu the chief of Ara, also went up and asked the king, "I pray thee, let thy concubine Bracha, my daughter, be thy wife." Likewise Enom hearkened to him and made Bracha his wife. Yet again, Yael herself went up to Enom and asked him, "I pray thee, O king, take me as thy wife, and let me bear thee children." Enom even hearkened to her voice and made her his wife. Thus all his former concubines were now his wives. However, it was not over yet. The head of the harem, Mary, now with her title rendered useless, closed off the harem temporarily, then passed her title to Jerusha of Zetu, and went up to the king and asked of him, "I've admired thee from afar, and have fallen for thee. I pray thee, let me be thy wife, and ask my father for his blessing if you desire me back." Nam also hearkened to Mari's voice, and he went and asked her father, General Jazer, for his blessing, and he gave King Enom his blessing. Enom then took Marie, the daughter of General Jazer of Zeha-Enom, to wife. Thus General Zeradin and Manasseh the scribe were brothers-in-law to the king, and their father, General Jazer, was the father-in-law to the king. However, King Enom laid not with them. Chapter 26. Archaeologists have just found an inscription in the cave of Ortuna located in the oceans of the Zeha-Enomite Empire saying this, "Porta aperuit et revertitur." King Enom heard of the archaeological find, and he commanded them, saying, "Bring forth the finding and inform me once it is translated." The archaeologists brought forth the find, and they found it translated to say, "The portal had opened, and he's coming back." Enom, expressing his confusion, said to them, "What does this mean? Does it mean that Arthur will visit, or will he have a kingdom in the overworld once more?" The archaeologists said to Enom, "We don't know, but we may have a theory, as it said that the portal has opened, meaning one of the dimensions is opening, either the end or the nether, and it might be referring to King Draken or King Flammus. It is best to consult the king of Ortuna about this." King Enom then said to them, "We shall tell Arthur himself, and bring the finding to him, and see if he confirms the words of the tablet." The archaeologists then nod, and Enom heads his way to talk to King Arthur. They went down before the throne of King Arthur and presented the tablet with the inscription on it, and King Enom said to Arthur, "Behold, O king of Ortuna, archaeologists have found an inscription, and they say that it might indicate the return of King Flammus or King Draken. What do ye say?" King Arthur said to the king of Zeha-Enom, "Prophecy spoke of this moment, way before the great battle. A man named Ziron saw a vision of a king coming back and raining havoc on the world. This king he spoke of looked like King Flammus himself. However, he also spoke that a hero will gather the people of the world to fight and defeat him once and for all. However, I did not expect it to happen soon. King Enom said to the king of Ortuna, "If the hero that he referred to is me, I can see now why I have the influence that I have now, and why I was capable of defeating a Tannin named Terror, Ish the king of the Slimes, Aisha the queen of the Tannins, Tuolak the king of Cook, and Akash the tyrant and others like them. At least most of the world has heard of my fame of slaying these monsters, and why I even have an empire in the first place. I see why this hath come to pass, my purpose in life. I shall even go to Arshavir of a northern tundra and sound out if they will join us to battle. Where and when will this battle take place?" The king of Ortuna then said to Enom, "Flammus is unpredictable, but there will be signs of his. First, his minions will appear out of nowhere. Then people will start hearing voices to convince them to join his side, and finally he will reveal himself. And the battle will take place on the shores of Zeus, for it is the place where Ortuna once stood." Enom then asked, "The small 2 islands in the middle of the ocean?" Arthun responded, "On the land they called Serpent Isles." Enom then said to Arthun, "That be territory of the empire. At one time the Kukite pirates stole the land, then a sea serpent chased them away." Arthun responded, "Yes, Serpent Isles was the location of where the capital once was, and where the final battle will take place." Enom then asked, "Final battle? Will it be the final battle of the whole world, or just between Flammus? Due to the fact that sin crawls across Ortuna, and even the beasts and the Tannins are monsters, and they show no peace." Arthun responded to Enom, "The final battle is between only King Flammus. The final battle of the whole world is another prophecy itself." Enom then says to Arthun, "I see. For the meantime, what action shall we take till the first wave of Flammus?" Arthun commands Enom, saying, "Take precautions, Enom. Tell the entire world of this prophecy coming true, for once Flammus shows his face, he will be ruthless." Enom then said to Arthun, "Let thy will be done." Enom then asked Arthun, "Is there anything else you wish to add before our departure?" Arthun responds, "No, Enom. Go forth and prepare for the upcoming battle." Enom then says to Arthun, "As you wish, O king of Ortuna." Then Enom and the other archaeologists depart back to Ziha Enom to Kazaya. King Enom of Ziha Enom sends out a letter saying, "I have just spoken with King Arthun of the kingdom of Ortuna himself. A warning of a terrible prophecy is coming to pass soon. The king of Ortuna commands us to bear arms and be prepared. A wave will come where minions of the tyrant King Flammus will attack all across Ortuna. Then the second wave will be voices that everyone will hear across Ortuna in an attempt to convince everyone to join Flammus. Heed him not. Then finally, King Flammus will show himself from the nether dimension and will go to Serpent Isle, and the battle will take place there where we will defeat him once and for all. I call to the tribes of Zetu, Ara, Aza, Enom, Arshavir, and to the kingdoms of Dur, Isham, and Hud, to fight against King Flammus, and to protect Arthun and all of Ortuna. I shall await for responses from every corner of Ortuna." Chapter 27. This account was written by Utarn, the scribe of Zetu. Zekias and Menashe each had their offices across from each other in the palace on the first floor, and they copied King Anam's announcement and published them in Seha Anam, then had them sent all across Ortuna. On the same floor, on the other side of the palace, on the front right of the palace, when facing its front, right in front of the stairs, is the kitchen where the cooks prepare meals for King Anam. During this time, people began to love Queen Sarah that they began to call her Zobia, calling her a gift from God. Queen Sarah loved it so much that she adopted it as a nickname. However, when King Anam saw her, he went over and spoke to her kindly to help her find comfort in her trouble. Queen Sarah felt calm and safe around him every time. Queen Sarah then suggested to her husband, "In this time of trouble in both of our lives, let me bear you children, so that you may have heirs if you were to die in battle against Flammus." The suggestion at first did not please King Anam, however. When he saw the sadness of his wife, he accepted, and he took her to his bedchamber, and he went in unto her, and she conceived. Queen Zobia bore Anam a son named Ashar. After him she bore Anam a second son, and he named him Zabias. King Enom went on a patrol with General Saradin upon Tannin-pulled chariots, and a soldier of theirs, Zesh by name, ran up to them and said to them, "O king, behold, I have found in stele of old, written in a language not of our tongue." The soldier led them to the stele, and it sat up as if it bursted from the ground along the shoreline of northern Enom. The stele was dark in color, and on the top of it depicted an image of a winged tannin and a man with a trident, and the man had a crown upon his head, and below it were words written in an unknown language. To Enom he perceived it as the ancient written record of the battle between Ortuna, Draken, and Flammus, even perceiving it to be where the written historical source came from.
Chapter 28.
This account was written by Zeni, the scribe of Enom. King Enom held a feast to celebrate his son Zabias' birth, and he invited the kings, the princes, the advisors, honored guests, his wives, relatives of theirs, and other officials. During the feast, Zekiah fell over out of his seat and fell unconscious, and he was rushed and treated. King Enom said to his guards, "Investigate this matter." They did so, and they found that he was struck with a serious illness. The doctors came in, and they said to the king, "There is nothing we can do for Zekiah, your grandfather. He will die." Days later, Zekiah gave up the ghost, and he died. King Enom held a public funeral for him, and he told the kingdom everything about him that he knew of him. However, Zekiah never told Enom who sent him. Sometime later, voices began to call out to everyone, tempting people to turn to the side of the voice. Enom heard this, and he hearkened not to it, remembering what Arthur had spoken to him concerning it. Therefore King Enom went to remind everyone. The majority of his empire hearkened unto Enom's plea, and others hearkened to the voice, not knowing that they were being deceived. Chapter 29. Lampu visits King Enom at the palace on Mount Kezia, where an attack occurred with mobs storming the palace. Eventually, all the mobs were defeated. Then an announcement said to all of Ortuna, "People of Arthunis, I am King Flammus, and I will return to get my revenge." Later, King Enom took all those who answered his call and traveled to Serpent Isles, where a portal appeared at, with no one being able to enter therein, and where King Flammus sent out a series of attacks. Before he did, King Flammus' second-hand man saw the large army from all corners of Ortuna, and he said to them, "Who dares come to the portal? State your name." Enom said to him, "I am King Enom of Enom. Who might you be?" King Flammus' second-hand man said to him, "I am the protector of the portal, the second hand to King Flammus." Enom said to him, "I didn't know King Flammus hired men to work for him?" The man answered, "Yes, I was his second in command during the great battle." Enom said to him, "I heard a voice calling out to us, saying, 'People of Arthunis, I am King Flammus, and I will return to get my revenge.' I even heard a portal had opened here on Serpent Isle, and I came as quickly as I could." The second in command asked Enom, "So you came to stop my boss?" Enom answered, "That is correct." The man informed Enom, "No one can stop my boss, you will perish." Enom informed the guard, "I have the king of Ortuna and the world at my side. We shall defeat thine king." After the conversation ceased, the attack began. The drowned surrounded in the water, the wither skeleton stormed the land, and the gas hovered the heavens, fighting all those united against Flammus. During the battle, Enom's side had the upper hand, till a point where their swords were snatched and later returned to test the humans. During the battle, the guard saw some weakness in the humans as they struggled against the withers. The battle lasted a while till the waves ceased, ending in human victory, but still could not enter the portal therein. As one of the withers fled, it dropped a nether star. At the time, no man knew what the item was, and King Enom kept it with him for the time being. Before King Flammus' right-hand man departed, he said to King Enom, "You know that this is only the beginning. King Flammus will attack soon." Then he departed. Chapter 30. After the great battle were the city-state kingdoms. Then was the Enomite Empire, who now goes against King Flammus of old. Emperor Enom had guards posted at Serpent Isles to report back to him if any event were to take place there. King Flammus' right-hand man eventually would return to the portal and would slay Enom's men on post there. The thing was reported back to the emperor, and he took with him all of his allies and the nether star, as he had a gut feeling that he should bring it with him, and he went and saw the very guard from last time. The guard said to the young emperor, "You finally made it." Enom said to him, "Yes, I did." The guard furthermore said to Enom, "Well, you'll have to go through me before you enter my boss's domain." The guard with netherite armor on leapt toward the young emperor with a diamond sword in hand and combated him. Enom had on iron armor with an iron sword and shield. He fought him, and within seconds Emperor Enom quickly slew the guard despite him having better armor than Enom. The quick victory took Enom and the others by surprise, as they all thought that he would put up more of a challenge. After the Quard's defeat, Enom saw a place on the side of the portal, and thought to put the nether star on it. He did so, and the portal opened. He went in and traveled to find King Flammus. Upon entering therein, he and the others were amazed and frightened upon seeing the nether realm for the first time, seeing where King Flammus had been trapped at for the past millennium. Enom found a portal ruin in the ceiling as he thought it was where King Flammus was, but was proven wrong. He descended downward, and King Flammus himself spotted him doing so, and caught up with him. King Flammus said to Enom, Well, what do we have here? Fresh meat. Enom said to him, Yes, and I'm going to find your palace and burn it. King Flammus furthermore said to Enom, It also seems you defeated my good-for-nothing right-hand man, Enom jokingly said he was sorry. To this, King Flammus said, I won't be. King Flammus at that very hour gave Emperor Enom blindness, as a ghast was shooting fireballs at him as he tried to survive. King Flammus then said to the young emperor, Oh, did you think I would play fair? To keep himself entertained, Enom asked Flammus, Did you give the same blindness effect to King Arthunus at the great battle? To this, King Flammus confirmed that question. King Flammus furthermore said, I never play fair. Emperor Enom asked Flammus, If you used blindness on him, how then did he defeat you? Flammus answered him, saying, Oh, he cheated. Enom asked him, How did he cheat? Flammus answered him, His power. To this, Enom jokingly added, I mean, if it makes you happy, he's dead and his son reigns. And I'm a long-time descendant of him. Every man that lives today is a descendant of him. King Flammus said to Enom, I know, I want his son's power. After these things were said, Enom constantly kept trying to find his way with the blindness effect, and right before him appeared King Flammus in diamond armor with a diamond sword and shield in hand. And Enom attacked him, but noticed he would not hurt him with his sword, so he switched to a netherite axe and managed to hit him with it. During the fight, Enom gained the upper hand, and had King Flammus flee once then turned his back to defend himself. After Enom had caught up, they clashed again and fought. After a bit of fighting, Emperor Enom fatally struck down his netherite axe upon King Flammus's head and slew him, causing him to die. As King Flammus was dying, his final words were, Curse you! With the defeat of King Flammus, the nether has been freed. However, his defeat left a power vacuum in the nether, it being filled by the Ender Dragon.